Hello and welcome back to the Flip Bama Flip podcast. I'm your host, Victoria. And in the words of Clark Griswold, when he makes it to Wally World, we made it. Dang it. We made it. We made it to regional finals. And this was a bit closer than I was hoping for. There were definitely some moments where my heart rate was higher than I would have liked. But the bottom line is we made it. Points don't carry over. All we needed to do was just survive and advance. And we did that. But I want to talk about kind of how we did it and what we are going to need to do to move forward. So if you didn't get to watch it, we did advance. We scored a 197.225. And the other team to advance out of our regional semifinals was Utah. And Utah advanced with a 197.5. Now, UCLA, who everybody expected to advance, did advance. They actually advanced with a 197.45. So Utah, believe it or not, was actually the highest scoring team to advance to regional finals in our region. And so it is going to be an absolute dogfight come Sunday. It's going to be one of those meets where every single 10th matters. And the difference between moving on to nationals and not might be as simple as, a hundredth of a point, a thousandth of a point. It really is, I think, going to be very, very close. So let's look at what we did and what we need to do in order to move forward and make it to nationals. So if you remember, we started on vault, and in my preview, I had said I thought we were going to start on floor, but I kind of bought into the idea of us starting on vault. And I've consistently said that the things I think we need to do on vault are we can't count a score in the 9-7s, and we need to have at least a couple of scores in the 9-9s. Unfortunately, last night, we didn't do either of those. We did count a 9.775, and we did not have a single vault that went into the 9-7s. And this, at this stage, and what we're seeing across the board, because I've watched all the regionals, of course, if there's gymnastics on, I'm going to be watching it, right? And so I've watched a lot of the other teams, and having watched this over the course of years, the level of talent and performance and execution that we're seeing it's growing exponentially each year. And so we're watching teams that are unranked, and they're having stuck vaults. They're sticking their landings. One of the gymnasts from Iowa yesterday got a 10 on bars. So it is not that there is just this concentration of talent on the blue bloods, if you will, the Oklahomas, the Floridas, the Alabamas, and things like that. There is a lot of talented gymnasts across the board. And so as the talent level rises, we have to rise with it. And just like previous vaulting rotations, it wasn't bad. We didn't have any missed vaults. Nobody sat a vault down. Nobody, kind of stumbled off the mats or anything like that. But it just needs to elevate higher if we are going to keep up with teams that are going to score a bunch of 9-9s on vault as well as other rotations. And so, again, not something where we're having huge errors. It's just things like hops on the landings, a form breaks during the air, a lot of soft knees last night. One of the things that was interesting, listening to other people talk about our vaulting rotation, and I like to hear what other people have to say because I fully recognize that I'm somewhat biased and I want to see the team do well and kind of look for the best, was that they pointed out the directional issues. We had a lot of vaults that were off to the side, and maybe they weren't completely over the lines. You'll notice they have those 2 lines on the vaulting mat so that the judges can see from where they're sitting whether the vault went straight or whether it kind of went crooked and off to the side. We had a lot that seemed to be crooked. And in a previous broadcast, Luisa Blanco, who I wish would be the commentator for all the meets because she just gives such great knowledge, she mentioned that is usually an issue if something's gone wrong in your pre-flight. And if your pre-flight is off, not only is your direction going to be off, but it could affect things like your amplitude, your height, your distance, which then affects your ability to get vaults all the way around. You may have to soften your knees to make sure that you make it. There's just this almost chain reaction of things that happen if your pre-flight is a little bit wonky. But it definitely does show up in terms of the directional things. And I think we took a hit in terms of the judges were taking off pretty significantly for directional issues. So the highest vault that we had in that lineup was a 9.875 from Jamison Sears. And I was happy to see that because she had a little bit of inconsistency. She wasn't always in the vault lineup this year. And so to see her kind of hitting her stride towards the end of the season is it's very encouraging, but we need everyone around her to step up and deliver on Sunday because we are going to need every 10th. Again, vault, it was good. It was fine. It wasn't something that took us out of the game, but we did leave the first rotation in third position. We were behind both Utah and Oregon State after the first rotation. And I do commend the team. They kept their composure. I think probably part of that was because they were heading to bars and they know that they are a powerhouse on bars. And so they knew this was a place where they could catch up. But you just don't want to start that far in the hole on Sunday when you're against a team like a UCLA or a Utah who are not going to slow down much as the meet goes on. But getting into bars, Peyton Walker started us off with a 9.925. So when your leadoff person is starting you off above a 9.9, you're going to probably have a pretty good bar rotation. And 4 of the 6 routines went 9.9 or higher. So we got a 9.925 from both Peyton Walker and from the anchor, Azarea Ra Akbar. Now, I'm trying to kind of make amends with myself in terms of I was not happy with the scoring, probably especially of Chloe's bar routine. But I'm trying to remind myself that we who are watching it on TV have a much different view of the routines than the judges. They're getting to see things from the side, whereas we have this weird, like kind of diagonal view. Sometimes it's straight on, but most often it's kind of this quasi-diagonal view of the bars that doesn't let us see things clearly. So sometimes there's deductions we see that the judges don't see, usually in the form of like leg separations. And then there are deductions that they may see that we don't see. And so in reading some of the live blogs about the meet from people who were there and had a different perspective, it sounded like we might have been short on some handstands throughout the rotation. And that's not something that we're going to necessarily be able to see. I think there were a couple of handstands that looked off, but I couldn't tell if they fit within that 10-degree margin of error. So obviously, you want that handstand straight up and straight vertical, but judges are not supposed to take a deduction if it's within 10 degrees of vertical. So there's a little bit of wiggle room there at the top, but it sounded like maybe we were outside of that range a couple of times, and maybe that's where the deductions were taking place. But the stuck landings were great. That was something that in some of the later meets in the season, we were not getting back to getting all those stuck landings, but it was just, they were cranking those out one after another. So that is good. They just need to do the same thing on Sunday. So after bars, we were actually tied with Utah. So we went from third to being tied for first. And going into beam, I had confidence because of the last beam rotation we had at SEC championships went so well. I was hopeful that we would get the same result. And I will say that I thought we did very well. I don't think it was necessarily reflected in the scores. And I do think there was some inconsistency in scoring. On beam, Chloe started us off. Chloe had a good meet. She had some uncharacteristic mistakes during this meet. So on beam, for example, She started with her candlestick mount. I've never seen her miss it. And this one, she just kind of overshot it. And so rather than sticking in that upright position when she first grabs the beam and holds that vertical position, she kind of just went over. Again, she didn't fall off the beam. It wasn't anything egregious. But when you start off your beam rotation off, it's hard not to kind of rattle you. And so throughout the beam routine, she seemed at times a little hesitant. There were maybe a couple of just the most minor balance checks, but it seemed like the judges were taking everything during our beam rotation. So I had that there was a balance check on her double stag jump. She had a little bit of soft knees on her front aerial. She had a great stuck landings, a little bit of form issues, but she started off with a 9.75. That is a very uncharacteristic score for Chloe. And in that sense, I feel okay about it because I don't see Chloe as a gymnast who kind of makes the same mistakes twice. So I don't predict that she will have a problem with her candlestick mount on Sunday. She's never had a problem with it before. I don't expect her to have a problem with it there. Love Burt did great. She had, again, it was just a lot of little balance checks. This was a rotation where it was just like 1,000 paper cuts, right? These little balance checks. I also had a question, and again, the view from that we're seeing on TV, it's kind of hard to tell, but I had a question about her ring jump and whether that front leg was completely horizontal. And the university, the Alabama gymnastics team, produced some photos from the meet, and one of them was actually her on the beam doing the ring jump, and you can see that that front leg is not quite vertical. So I think the judges were taking things off for little things like that. She had a little shuffle on her landing. It wasn't a step. I mean, it really was a shuffle, but she ended up with a 9.8. I thought Gabby Gladio had a great kind of typical beam routine for her. Wonderful stuck landing, 985. Gabby Ladanye, I thought, did a great job in terms of steadiness. Again, she felt rushed at times. I think sometimes she gets to her end positions and moves through the dance elements very quickly. And it gives a sense of being nervous and being anxious and being unsettled. And I think the judges might sense that and I don't know that they're taking off for being rushed, but it may create the illusion of balance checks or not being settled and trying to rush through your dance elements to cover up a mistake, because sometimes that's what people on beam do. And so she ended up with a 985. I think she also had probably got taken some points off for having a deeper squat in her landing than is typical for her. All right, more notes. With Ryan, I can't believe it. She did her triple series and she nailed it. I saw her do the back handspring. I saw her do the first layout, and then I was like, oh man, she's going for it, because saw her take off for that second one. And she landed it, and she did this beautiful, slow, like, watch me, I'm in complete control. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. She had a stuck landing. She only got a 9.825. I think Ryan does have some built-in deductions, just some form breaks that she has cleaned up a lot. And I know that between this season and next season, that her beam routines are just going to get better and better and better. And I'm so excited for what the future holds there. And then Kylie had a really, really phenomenal routine. Just at the end on her dismount, her feet didn't move, but she did a really large leaning forward to steady herself. And so she took a deduction there, but ended up with a 9.85. Beam was a kind of in some ways mirrored vault, except for the fact that we didn't have any scores in the 9.7s, but we didn't have any scores in the 9.9s either. And so I think in order for us to keep pace with UCLA and with Utah, we have to have at least 199 on every rotation. We're not going to be able to make that up in bars and floor when we're going against teams that pretty much are going to get 9.9s on every single rotation and have gymnasts who are capable of getting 10s as well. And so, going into the fourth rotation, we were solidly in second. I was not going into floor, really worried about Denver, really worried about Oregon State. It seemed like, okay, we're going to move on pretty easily. And we're also going to floor, which is one of our strongest rotations. So I didn't have a lot of concerns. And then we started. And again, I kept writing the words uncharacteristic mistakes. And my hope is that this is just nerves, that the team was just a little bit nervous. They kind of had to get those nerves out, and that we come in on Sunday and just kind of do what we need to do. But Chloe had a large foot slide on her first pass, and I really haven't seen her have a foot slide in a long time, and definitely not one that large. It was really quite large. And she ended up with a 9.85. Chloe consistently scores 9.9 on floor. And so that's what we need her to do, especially in that leadoff position, to set up the people next to her. So that was not worrisome. A 9.85 was definitely going to get it done. But then Rachel Rybicki was up next, and she nailed her first pass, which is, of the two passes that she has, is the one that has given her more problems than the second one. But in her second pass, she actually ended up falling. She landed short on her front leg and tried to take a step back. I think she took a couple steps back and then eventually just had to roll out of it. She ended up with a 9.9. At that point, I was like, we might be in trouble, because Oregon State and Denver were still chugging along and still kind of plugging away. And if we had another major error on floor and had to take a low score, maybe a 9.5, 9.5 or lower, those two teams were definitely back in the hunt. And we still had 4 more routines to go. And so I actually started to get quite nervous at this point. And I was especially nervous because the next gymnast up was Mackenzie Matters. Not that Mackenzie has done badly this season. She hasn't. She's been great. But she's a true freshman. And this was her very first routine in the postseason. And because she did not vault earlier during the meet, which she sometimes does. So she's going out there. She's been waiting all meet long, and now the pressure is on. Anyone who comes up after a fall, regardless of which apparatus it is on, that is kind of the hardest routine. And I am so proud of her because she absolutely went out there and nailed it. She did a great routine and scored let me look, 9.875. Not bad. She was a tiny bit short on her first pass, covered it up really well. And that's really the only kind of major deduction that I saw. But to follow a fall with a 9.875 when you're a true freshman and this is your first routine in the postseason, I just endless respect, so much pride in her. I'm just so happy for her. She had to be just breathing a sigh of relief and hopefully feeling really proud of herself. After her, Azarea Ra Akbar, she scored a 9.9. I probably would have scored her a little bit higher just because she does the dance element so beautifully. All her leaps are kind of extended and beyond what is the bare minimum. And so that's another issue for another day, but that's some of the issues we have with scoring, is that there's not really a way to reward individuals who are doing skills and doing them exquisitely and not just doing the bare minimum. But I think probably where they took a deduction was in her first pass, she took a rather large step forward. It seemed a little bit uncontrolled, and that might be where she got that deduction. Jameson, she ended up with a 9.825, and she got a little tripped up on her leaps, which was unusual. That's usually not an element that trips her up, and that's actually an element that usually she's trying to highlight because her leaps are so spectacular. But she had a little stumble. She had to kind of step out of it. I didn't see really anything wrong with her tumbling passes. So to me, that was a little bit low. But again, the judges are seeing things at a different angle and a different height than we are. So there might have been some issues elsewhere that we didn't see. Um, Going into the last performance, I was breathing a little sigh of relief because we had made it through without another major issue, and it was Gabby Gladio, who on floor, I just have endless confidence in. And of course, she came out, she delivered. She ended up with a 9.9. I'm guessing that they might have taken off for some form on her full in. Um, that's all I could see, but it was enough to move on. So again, we ended up with a 197.225, and it was enough to make it to Sunday. Now, in Sunday, again, I think we've got to score in the 9.9s on each rotation. Not saying that every score has to be a 9.9 or higher, but we've got to be able to get 9.9s in order to keep up with Utah and with UCLA, both of who did not have perfect meets. I think Utah's kind of scored maybe at the upper end of what they are doing. I mean, they looked really good. They did have some minor mistakes and things like that. So, of course, they weren't performing at their very, very best. We know at their very best, they've scored over a 198, but they did well. And so we were about 0.25 behind them, I think, is where we ended, something like that. But so we weren't that far off. And then again, UCLA, who had been scoring in the 198s, ended up with a 197.45. So people are and teams are looking vulnerable. And so there's definitely a path forward to Alabama, but we've got to stay in our bubble. We've got to elevate in terms of especially vault and beam and just get those small little details, because those are the tenths, those valuable tenths that we are losing that just add up over the course of the meet. If you plan to watch, the meet is on Sunday. It's tomorrow, April 5th at 7 p.m. Central. Again, like everything regionals, you can stream it on ESPN Plus. I know I will be watching. My children will actually be staying with my in-laws, so I'll be able to watch it in peace. Oh my goodness. That's a miracle in my house. And so very excited and looking forward to it. Just real quick to know, if for some reason Alabama as a team doesn't make it through, it doesn't mean that some of the individuals won't make it through. So you'll notice that there are some individuals competing with the teams going through because their teams didn't make it to the postseason. But all the individuals who are competing with their teams are also competing for individual spots in the semifinals and at nationals. So I know there was a year where Alabama didn't make it to nationals, but Luisa Blanco made it on bars and was able to compete as an individual. So I do imagine that regardless of what happens on Sunday, there will be some Alabama representation at nationals, which is always great for the team. But I'm hoping for a team win. I think we can do it. I'm going to put on my lucky shirt. You put on your lucky shirt. We'll all put on our lucky shirts and cheer them on and get everything headed in the right direction. But until then, please, of course, like the video, subscribe to the channel. There's, as you can see, a lot of stuff going on. This way you don't miss any of it. And we will see you post meet Sunday to talk about what happened and hopefully be planning for nationals. But until then, Roll Tide.